Matthew or Matt? You want Matthew or Matt? Matt.
No, just Matt. My mum calls me Matthew, and only when she's pissed off. You know?
The goal isn't to live forever. The goal is to create something that will.
Welcome to Perspective, a podcast for wedding creatives, where we sit down, often with a special guest, and talk about our many years of experience in the wedding industry, so you can learn from us and grow your wedding business. And who the hell are we? Well, I'm Simon, and this is Mr. Boney, and together we are Cinemate Films, two Scottish-based wedding filmmakers who love nothing more than drinking coffee and talking shop with others in the wedding industry. And we've teamed up with Photography Farm to bring you 6 special episodes of this podcast in anticipation of London Thrive, an all-star wedding photography workshop taught by 6 phenomenal mentors. This episode is, of course, still sponsored by With Jack, but I will get onto that a little bit later in the show. Greg, good morning. How are you doing? And who are we talking to?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm good, thank you. We are talking to Matthew K. Hello, how are you, Matthew?
Hello, Matthew.
Matt.
Matt, I'm just giving you the trouble. Oh, no.
No, it's fine. I wasn't going to say anything. I was just going to roll with it, but we could go. Just roll. Let's do it. I'll be Matthew for you today. But just today,
you're a good boy. You're a good boy.
We are talking to Matt K. How are you, Matt?
That'll be it. I'm good. Thank you, fellas. How you doing?
Good, man. Good. Have you got a coffee or anything there to keep you going this morning?
I've got one coffee. I wouldn't even say it's fancy coffee. This is South Africa's finest instant brand. So I have no does the job there. Keeps me going.
Yeah.
Nice. Oh shit, we haven't poured our coffee. Bloody hell, we are not prepared this morning, Matt. Hang on.
While he pours that, why don't you give us a bit of an intro to who Matt is? Like, who are you and how did you get started in photography?
That's a long story. So I suppose if I had to go back to the beginning, I didn't really, photography wasn't really something that was in the plans, really. I wasn't sort of wake up in the morning, I was like, that's what I want to do. It came out to a very roundabout sort of route. Before I got into the whole photography game, I was sort of living in the Caribbean for a while. I worked as a sort of semi-professional sailor when I was sort of in my early 20s. I had a little yacht that I used to live on in the Caribbean, and I used to sail other people's boats for money, basically. And then I'd take my boat and bounce up and down the islands for a bit. And through a sort of series of events, I ended up working on a ranch in Texas. And one of the guys in the caravan next to me, he photographed around the ranch. He was kind of like the sort of resident ranch photographer. And his name was Skeeter Hagler. So anyway, the most Texan man you've ever met in life. But old Skeeter, and I started making a little bit extra money, sort of assisting Skeeter around. And he had an old camera that he gave me. He had a darkroom in his inside his caravan. So I started shooting there, and then kind of just started from there. And I really kind of just, I suppose the nice thing about when you're young and traveling with a camera is it gives you like a really good reason to just explore and be curious. It gives you like a reason to do it, right? So otherwise you're just wandering around. But when you got a camera, you kind of have a point. And I think that was really the start of it for me. It kind of gave me a reason to go look around the corner of what's going on there. And it was that kind of a thing. But the cool thing about Skeeter, which I didn't know at the time, was when I was sort of looking through his bookshelf, I looked at one of the books and it had his name on the back of it. And I was like, yeah, Skeeter, I didn't know you made a book, man. That's pretty cool. Anyway, Skeeter won the Pulitzer Prize in 1984 for like a project that he did on cowboys in the Panhandle. So I'd been having like one-on-one lessons with this guy for 3 months, just learning how to shoot from this Pulitzer Prize-winning guy who was the most low-key guy, ever. So I suppose I got a good start, And then when I left, I bought a busted-up Jeep Cherokee for like about $200, and I drove it up to Canada, and he gave me the camera, and he was like, off you go. And so that was kind of how I started shooting.
Wow.
What made you even take a camera on your travels to begin with?
Well, I didn't have one. I got my camera when I started working there. No, it was when I got to the ranch, I just kind of like, that was the first time I even really thought about it at all in any way. It wasn't really wasn't even in my sort of frame of reference. It was just something that, my mates had cameras that took pictures of me.
Yeah.
Wasn't something.
So what was there like? Was there like one major takeaway that you had while being mentored, I suppose?
I think what was good about it was I got a really solid foundation in the kind of technical side of it, to be honest, because I was shooting on an old film camera, so you kind of had to get it right. And it was black and white, so we were hand processing. And I think I think that probably started like a love of black and white for me, but I've kind of definitely moving. I'm getting more towards color these days, but I really felt like, working that in depth with one medium and kind of like really learning your camera to the point where you can kind of be intuitive with it without having to think too hard is something that I think it's, it was, and one of the lessons that I think was really good about him was that it was like totally good to make mistakes. He wasn't a technical perfectionist in the sense of like that picture's not sharp enough or that's not exposed correctly. I think you got much more of a sense of like his idea of a good picture, which I think I've taken along with me, as a picture that makes you kind of respond to it in any way. Actually, like any kind of response is better than no response to a picture. So I think being able to take pictures and kind of be able to stand behind them and be like, I believe in that picture, I think it's a good picture, is something that I think is really photographers. I've been lucky about that, is that I've kind of been able to kind of take a picture, and if someone else thinks it's not a good picture, it doesn't really bug me, because I've kind of made peace with that fact of like, nah, I like it. Okay, that's I want it. It's staying. Like that was a good thing to learn early, because I think when you're growing up with a lot of photographers around you, because after all of this, I ended up going to study photography in Johannesburg for a bit, just to make sure I was doing it right, and like I wasn't sure. And in that school, it was a very good school, and it was a very intense school. We had lots of crit sessions with lots of big name photographers in the world of photography, not in the commercial world, like in the wide world of photography. And being able to kind of hold your ground a bit and be like, no, I believe in that picture because I like it, and I can give you a reason for why I like it, I think was a really good start. Because I can see how a lot of photographers get lost trying to defend their pictures, or they don't have a firm foothold to decide that it's their work. They kind of waiting for someone else to tell them it's a good photograph or not a good photograph, and they need that validation. And I think I was lucky to avoid a lot of that.
Yeah. Do you are you victim to it nowadays with like social media being so prominent, and people are like my images please, and all that kind of stuff? Like, does even that get through to you?
I'll tell you what it is with that. I think I couldn't care how many likes I get on a picture or the kind of response to it, or the comments, all of that. There's a couple of photographers who I really respect, who I think have kind of visual language that I respect, and that I kind of, their opinion matters a lot more to me than most. So, if I get one like, but it's from that one person who I'm like, yeah, we're on the same page, and I understand when I see their work, I understand what they're looking at. And and sometimes you feel that envy, like I wish I'd seen that, but those kind of photographers are the ones that if I do get a response from them, or then I'm like, okay, cool, I'm on the right track. But I do think that it's a mistake, because sometimes sometimes I look at my feed and I'm like, oh man, some of these pictures, like no one's seen a bride's face for like a week. I should probably like change that. I should probably put a picture that's not the back of someone's head, And then I was like, it really irritates me when I do that and I get tons of likes, and I'm like, damn it. Damn it. Like you kind of like, you don't really, because it's part of the industry. You need to, like, prospective clients need to see what you're doing, but it's not necessarily a photograph that I would be like super proud of. It's just something I need to like remind everyone that I do shoot weddings.
And I wonder how many people suffer from that balance as well, where you're like, I am running a business, so technically I need to make the shop window, the shop front look like I do wedding images, and that's the thing. But really, I want to be pushing the envelope a little bit, but still in the wedding space. So it's like, it's an interesting balance, isn't it?
It's a tough balance, but it's also, I think, like one of the things that I think you have to get right if you're going to become a wedding photographer is you've got to put images out there that you want to shoot more of, like in that vein. Because if you're going to get booked by people who like your work that you like, then I suppose you're on the right track because you're going to enjoy shooting them. Whereas if you're going to change your style to be like, I wonder what the client wants to see, you're really setting yourself up for a nightmare because then you just people pleasing your way through the industry, and that's going to catch up eventually, and you're going to, not good. So I think you've got to have, there's a line where you can't just shoot everything for yourself. There has to be a sort of element. I mean, there has to be an element of you're in an industry and there's people need to book you, and they need to kind of have a general idea of what you do. But I do think that the safest way to go as any kind of sort of actually in any photography industry is to, if you do find what you like, is to stick to that or adapt or change, but post what you like. Post the pictures that you like the best because hopefully people will book you based off of that. And that way you don't have to kind of get to the end of it. Like someone says, hey, this is really not what I expected. You're like, no, man, you saw the pictures. That's what you get more of that. That's what I do.
Yeah.
So I think
absolutely
got to be careful there,
Yeah. Yeah, that actually reminds me of the feeling I had this week. We had a wedding, and I don't know why, but all the family knew us, and like they knew we were the filmmakers, and in their eyes we were like awesome, and it just gave me, I don't know, I can't speak for you, Greg, but gave me such a buzz to then want to step it up a little bit, and it was quite like nice to feel that.
Mother of the bride's reaction was when we walked in to the room in the morning. She was like, I love. Ray went on for ages, and it was like, whoa, okay.
I don't take
pretty cool.
I don't take compliments very well either. So
I think that would be terrifying, utterly terrifying, mate. It's the worst. I definitely live by the kind of aim low, shoot high kind of thing. Don't give him. Don't come in there with like, I'm the best, I'm gonna crush this thing. I'm always like, my mind is like, I am gonna totally mess this up. There's no way in hell that I'm gonna get this right. Every single wedding I shoot before I shoot it, I'm like, I'm a failure and I'm gonna be awful and they're gonna hate it and I'm never gonna do it.
Yeah.
And then when I look at the end, I'm like, I'm pleasantly surprised and they love it and I'm like, escaped, another one.
Escaped.
So do you have that feeling every wedding?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's good, because I too have that feeling, and I'm just like, I've been doing it for like 13 years now, and when's that feeling going to dissipate?
That imposter syndrome thing never goes for me, man. Like I always think one day someone's going to be like, Matt's pretty crap. It's basically been a fraud this whole time. Like, what the hell have we been doing? Like, it's definitely a place in your head. You're not quite sure what you. And also, I think one of the problems when you do start shooting sort of slightly higher end weddings, which is really worrying, is that sometimes I've been booked by a bride, and when I get there, you kind of walk in and you check the decor, and you're like, this is very much not my vibe, right? At all. Like, and then you walk up to the bride, and you're like, just double checking. It's day of wedding. Like, have you seen my work before? No, but my friend whoever said that you were the best. And you're like, oh, this is going to be a tough one. Like you suddenly like, oh, we are going to be, this is going to be either, that's the fear, is when like you realize sometimes, honestly, I think I've been booked a couple of times and people have never even seen the pictures. No idea. Their friend, I shot like their friend's wedding and their friend said, you got to use Matt. Yeah. That's terrifying.
I mean, referrals are always nice, but I'd feel nervous.
Yeah, when you walk in and you're like, this is totally not and you can tell by the way the bride is kind of, you pick up the camera and every time you pick it up, they turn to you like, and you're like, okay, whoa, we gotta have a little reset here because this is going to be a tough one, Like,
Well, the other wedding that we shot this week, I heard the phrase "let's do a candid," which I thought was kind of in the same kind of vibe. You pick up your camera and then they're like ready for you, and it's just, I don't know. It was really interesting to work in that kind of environment. I think we did thrive in it, which was kind of nice, like for them. But it was interesting and not the usual way that we work. So yeah. Anyway, let's get back to you, Matt. What? So you're on the ranch. Then you went to study. Then what? What happened after you studied? Like once you realized, hopefully, I'm doing it right.
So
let's go out and make some work. What was the kind of work you were focusing on?
So the school that I studied at was a place called the Market Photo Workshop in Johannesburg, which was founded by a South African photographer called David Goldblatt, who is pretty much South Africa's sort of like, he's the big boy in the scene, you know. And so it was a really interesting school because what he did was he founded it during apartheid as a place to train young sort of black photographers who could document themselves as opposed to white photographers coming into townships, taking images and then coming out. So it started as this sort of way of creating a kind of essentially photo documentary setup where he was training these young photographers, and a lot of incredible photographers came out of that school. And then it sort of evolved after the end of apartheid into a kind of there are two very distinct sides to it. There was PDP, which is photo documentary, and there was another program called AP, which is advanced photography, which really, and I always thought I'd end up doing the documentary stuff, but I ended up doing this program called advanced photography, which was far more, I don't really know what, like, it's always a tough question when people ask like that. I don't want to call it fine art photography because I don't really think that's what it is. It's that borderline between documentary and storytelling and kind of narratives of your own, speaking about yourself a lot through, and I think, so I kind of did a course in that for a year, which I suppose when I really started kind of finding my own kind of style more than anything else. And then I kind of moved from that school. I stayed at that school actually for a couple of years. And I lectured there for a bit. And then I worked as a photojournalist for a lot of magazines. And I used to shoot for AFP and Reuters and them and doing that kind of stuff. And then I kind of did my own projects alongside all of those. And a lot of my projects had to do with sort of memory and spaces that I knew. I always found that I work best in, for my own work anyway, in places that I'm familiar with. I think that comes a lot from kind of the South African, South Africa punches quite well above its sort of weight in the world of photography. There's massive photographers come out of South Africa, Roger Ballin, Peter Hugo, like there's some big guys out there. And I think what was really interesting was I found making work in places really close to me really kind of important because the narrative of South African photography has always been like we go out somewhere else and come back. And I kind of felt like working in my own space that I knew really well was really important. So kind of did projects around my home where I grew up in the country and spaces that I spent a lot of time. And that was my own work, And then at the time I got a grant from the States to do a thing called Turney Fellowship. It was like a fellowship to do a project in public spaces. I moved to Durban and I was documenting the beachfront, which is this very contested space during apartheid, but post-apartheid has been super integrated. And it's famous, and there's a famous photograph of Durban beachfront that was like whites only or whatever, So it's become a very integrated space, but one of the few very integrated spaces in South Africa still. So I was working in that space, and then I ran to my fiance who's had just finished doing fashion, and we started dating, and I stayed in Durban. And then she started making wedding dresses, and like one thing led to another. People were like, hey man, you're a photographer, she makes a dress, come shoot this. And also, to be honest, there wasn't enough international news happening in Durban for me to sell anything to anyone. So I was like, well, weddings, let's hit it, right? So that's kind of how I got into it. It definitely wasn't a plan, though. I didn't like wake up and be like, wedding industry is what I want, and that's where I'm going to go. It just sort of evolved into it.
It's funny because I think many people have that same kind of, they just kind of land in it, whether it's a family or can you do my wedding or a friend, same thing.
Definitely.
It's definitely like you've got that skill. Come and just use it here. And then all of a sudden it's like, I've now got a career in this industry.
Yeah.
But I think in South Africa I was lucky because I think in the sort of global wedding scene, it was a bigger trend. But in South Africa at the time when I started shooting, there weren't a lot of people kind of doing that sort of pure documentary style much. There were few, you know. So I came from that background. So I'd never really looked at wedding photography before. So when I started shooting weddings, I wasn't referencing anything except my own kind of like background, which was documentary and sort of a different style. So when I came into the wedding industry, I kind of brought that with it. And I was just lucky that in South Africa anyway, there weren't a lot of people doing it, and there was definitely a market for it at the time.
Yeah.
Which globally, I think a lot more people were doing it, for sure.
Yeah. So how long have you been now in the wedding industry?
Not that long, really. I'd say I started shooting properly, probably like 2017, 2018. I started, I'd say like the majority of my income shifted to weddings. And then it was 2 years of COVID. So it was like 17, 18, 19, COVID. And so then it's now we're here, you know, so not that long really, actually.
Yeah.
Just sort of, quick. But yeah, so I suppose maybe 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, okay. What's your favorite image that you've shot, and what makes it special?
Oof, mate, that is a hard one.
And by the way, just for all of our audio listeners who are in vehicles, if you're hearing if you're hearing horns of traffic, it's not on your end. It's on Matt's end.
Sorry,
it's on Matthew's end. It's on Matthew's end.
We're on main road. It's part of the deal.
Sorry, just thought
I think it's interesting because I think one of my favorite images that I shot, I don't think it'll actually be in that set that you've got, but you know what I always find really interesting is when you have an older, like, you know, like a grandparent or something. And like, I think one of the images that I remember the most is this very old guy. He must have been into his late 80s or 90s watching a first dance, you know, and he was alone, right? But which he'd obviously lost his partner at some point. And that kind of like this beginning and end of things at the same time in the same moment is really interesting. And that is the one thing about weddings. I could make a very controversial statement here. I don't particularly like weddings, right? But I love the opportunities that they present photographically for the type of work that I'm really interested in. That makes sense. Because coming from a street photography background or shooting documentary, as soon as I pick up a camera, everyone wants to know what you're doing. Like, who you're taking pictures of, why you're taking pictures of them. You got to explain yourself all the time, right? And I'm quite a big dude, and like, I'm noticeable with a camera. I don't just blend in, right? But at a wedding, suddenly, you're the closest you're ever going to be to a fly on the wall, properly. And you get to notice things and shoot things in a way that you never get to do otherwise, unless you get extremely lucky. And my interest in weddings in a big way, to be honest, is what can weddings do for my photography? Because I really enjoy shooting that kind of stuff. It's like there's an anonymity about it and an access about it to real human moments that you don't get to see that often from that distance without working days to try and find those type of pictures, to try and make them organically happen in a normal life. But being at a wedding and being allowed to access them, no questions asked, really creates an opportunity to do some very beautiful, very special, very unique and meaningful pictures that, you know, over your whole career, you might take 50 great pictures, right? Maybe. And you get more access to that if those are the kind of images that you're into at weddings than you do in almost any other thing. And I find that about weddings is what keeps me going back to weddings. Is there are, in amongst them, you might, out of 10 weddings, find 2 shots that when you die, you're going to be like, those were incredible. And you might never see that kind of level of intimacy or moment again. And I think that's what keeps it coming. That's what it does for me. That's what weddings do for me, I'd say.
I feel very connected with that answer that you gave, because I too don't really. I like what a wedding is in very basic forms, right? 2 people who have come together in life, and then they're deciding to celebrate their relationship and by saying very important words to each other, and hopefully those words will outlast, those words will be meaningful enough to carry them right through to their death. I find that's very meaningful for a family. But the whole idea of things, and unless it's like family heirlooms, but like the capitalism of it all, I just I'm not there with the whole capital thing. So
I think I'm with you with that, man. Like, I think what makes weddings so fascinating is the juxtaposition of the ridiculous with the very serious. That's what makes it so interesting, right? There are, if you had to sit back, if the aliens landed and just watched this, they'd be like, what on earth is this, right? Like, insanity going on here. Like, little mementos and tables, like flowers that are going to get wiped out the next day. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But there's an element of that ridiculousness, and that pageantry, which I find really interesting photographically. But there's also that very serious commitment in a moment, which balances it out. So there is this tension in a wedding, which is what I really find interesting. And there's also what I find interesting about shooting. I don't necessarily like shooting particularly big, expensive weddings. I really like the kind of like the home weddings, like 60 people, 30 to 60 people, where there's like a token. It's like we're going to do token flowers and it's like we're going to get, and those kind of things become really interesting because very often I find the moments more like the weight of it heavier in some ways, but also kind of more ridiculous. Yeah. And for me, photographically, that is the sweet spot.
Yeah, I'm with you. Matthew, I have to say that was a beautiful answer to my question. However, it was the wrong answer. You were supposed to say my favorite image is the one I'm going to take tomorrow. Quoting your favorite quote from Imogen Cunningham.
I won't lie. Don't put any faith in the quotes that I used for anything. Like forms that I gotta fill out are not where I spend long time thinking.
It's fine. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. No.
But I did want to ask you about that because what about that quote in particular do you like so much? Like, what resonates with you with it?
Well, I think as long as you believe in that quote, you're going to be a good photographer because you're going to keep hunting for a good image. I think that's basically what that means. It's like the day you wake up and be like, I've done it. I've shot the good stuff. I'm just going through the motions. And you're not searching anymore for anything for yourself. You're just doing what the client wants and ticking the boxes and going home. Well, I'm not saying get out of the industry because if you're still doing a good job and the client's happy and you're happy doing it, cool. But for myself, the day I wake up and I'm like, I'm no longer interested in any aspect of this. Like, there's nothing about, when I get at a wedding, I'm not going to be looking for good photographs. I'm just going to be looking for tick the box photographs. I need to get out of there for myself, not for the client, for anyone else, but for myself. Like, I want my best work to still be coming. I don't want to look back on my life and be like, I've done it. And now I'm just like spending time till the end. Like, I'm over that. Definitely.
With that being said, do you have an exit strategy in place? I know a few of our guests have talked about exit strategies, and they're thinking, can I be that photographer who's like 45 or 50 doing weddings? Like, do you think that way, or are you more just living your life, you're doing what you love to do?
It's a good question, it's a good question. I mean, I wouldn't say that I think the intensity of weddings, to maintain a standard or to keep reinventing or to keep sort of like renewing your drive. Because I think that's the thing, right? You got two things with weddings. You either got to have the drive in that you work for the couple and that like really what you want to do is make the couple as happy as possible. And that's where you get your enjoyment, right? And I suppose there's three. There's the financial reward, right? And then there's like your own photographic artistry where you're like, which one of these three? And for me, I know that it's not pleasing the couple. I mean, obviously I want to please the couple, but that's not my primary concern. It's not necessarily financial reward. And it has to be like making work that I'm proud of and kind of keeps me thinking as a photographer. So I think, but it is hard to imagine being 50 and still having that drive in the same way all the time. It's a good question. I wouldn't say I've got an exit plan. I'd say I should probably start working on one now.
Yeah.
You mentioned early on in your career you developed like a confidence in your own images and knowing what you see as a good image that you've shot. But obviously you've also had your work exhibited in other places and you've got a lot of awards. What do those things mean to you as well? Like obviously you know you've got your confidence in your own images, but having other people see that as well?
I think it makes a big difference to me in the wedding industry that I have got my other work that's not wedding based, where I put a lot of my kind of my own creative energy into that. And so I have a kind of, there's a bank of confidence that comes from that, which I can bring into the wedding industry somehow, where I kind of like, I trust my eye because I've worked with a lot of people that people whose work I really admire. And when I'm talking to them and we're talking about photography and it's actually quite a small group of people that think about photography in that way, like there's a huge commercial world and there's a big fine art world, but the overlap is not as big as you think, there's not that many people. And I think getting kind of having a place to feel like my wedding pictures I can show in that world and people from that world will respect them is a really big deal for me. Like my biggest fear, and I mean, it's a petty fear, but I suppose one of my biggest fears was to be like, you became a wedding photographer because you weren't really making it in the other, as a journalist or something, like you dropped out to become a wedding photographer. And I think what's been really good and I'm super proud of is I think when I sit down with guys who are super successful and they've done their own work in all kinds of like serious awards, I'm like, yeah, I think wedding photography has turned me into one of the, like a really good photographer. Wedding photography made me a better photographer by miles. Like I think the skill set that I learned as a wedding photographer outdid the work that I learned as a journalist or anything else, because you're always under pressure. You always got to make it happen. Your level of control is very limited. You got to make work happen in any situation, any time. And as a photographer, like you can be super proud of yourself if you can do that. That's a really hard thing to do. And you got to deal with people. A lot of guys are great photographers, but they don't have to deal with anyone. I'm like, man, it's really easy to shoot stuff that doesn't move. Serious, to start with. And it's really, really easy to shoot stuff that doesn't move and doesn't talk back. Like, it's cool. Like, no worries.
Yeah.
But like when it's moving and talking and they have ideas of their own and you're trying to fight this balance of like what I want and what they want, and it's messy and it's dramatic and it's the weather's changing. And if you can still do that, stay calm and shoot images that you are happy to like show people whose opinion you really respect outside of the wedding industry, I feel like for me, that's something I'm proud of. Be able to do that. Be like, this is not wedding photography per se. It's just photography that I shoot at weddings, and I really like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That reminds me of that saying, what was it? Those who can't do, teach. Like, it's that kind of, if you're, I always found that quite insulting.
Yeah. Totally.
Like, if I was a teacher and I heard that, I'd be like, fuck you, what the fuck?
Totally.
Like,
you're right about that with the wedding photography world. Like a lot of people here, like, hey man, you're a wedding photographer. Like you obviously didn't kind of make it as another type of photographer, and like this is your. But actually, especially recently, there's just so many good photographers, man. Like insanely good work. Like that work is transitioning between weddings into the fashion world, into the fine art world, into the documentary world. Like weddings have. From being a niche genre that was like you could picture it in your head like what wedding photography looked like. Now, if you ask me what wedding photography looks like, it looks like good photography to me. It just looks like really good photography, and that's been a really good change, man. Because I think that was the problem before, was you associated yourself with wedding photography, but you associated with the kind of super bright and white and cookie cutter stuff, and like that's not even to say that was that bad. At the time when guys were using backlight flash for raindrops, they were kind of inventing that as they went, on the moment. Like we all had to learn from these steps that guys took to be able to get to a point where we're like, doing whatever we want really. The wedding industry had to go through a lot of abuse for us to be able to sit here and make blurry images and like out of focus brides and like shooting on half Polaroid and half film and half this. Like the evolution of the wedding industry is a whole doctorate someone needs to do.
Yeah, it's interesting because when someone says, you know, kind of like what you did, you imagine what wedding photography is. I genuinely actually can, because it's one of those, like, it's not a genre in itself anymore. It is an amalgamation of whatever the creative wants to make it. So, like, and it's interesting how different countries can form the different kind of color palettes or approaches to style or whatever. It's super interesting.
Yeah, maybe like 20 years ago, you could have created this sort of stereotype image of what wedding photography was, but I think now it's just so varied that you can't. Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of it.
That is the beauty of it. That is the great thing about wedding photography, is that it's become whatever you want it to be now. There's no prerequisite of what it has to be, and that's
exactly.
But that's a really good thing for new guys coming up to know, and I think that's something that I think is. But then again, I think we were also. When I say we, it's not like I've been shooting for like 20 years on this, but like I do think that I was sort of just pre the Instagram boom, kind of in my photography, not necessarily in wedding photography, but I do think that one of the things that is coming back slightly, but I also think it's a big problem, is I think we all look at each other far too much, and we stop looking at things like books, and we stop reading about photography, because we think we just need to see the pictures. But understanding someone's motives for taking those pictures is really important. And I think we've got to this like consumable photography stage where we just like one image. And also with Instagram, or the way that we consume images now, narrative has become a big problem. It's a problem because it's we in the world of digital photography where you can shoot endless amounts, and you're in this world where we present the images one at a time. So it's a now. Oh, who's that?
This is Bonita.
This is Bonita. It's
office dog.
Yeah, I've got one too, actually.
Well, Bonita's only got 3 legs.
Oh, really? A tripod?
Yeah, she's a tripod. Yeah,
that's what her nickname should be.
Come here.
Get over here, you hairy dog.
I got one, yeah. I got one, and there's another one.
Where's your dog?
Flux, come say hello. Come. Who's that? Who's that?
Camera shy.
Yeah, he's not coming.
There we go.
There you go. Aww.
That's Flux. Good boy. Okay, off you get.
I know you like.
But yeah, I'm just saying, I think it's really important that we like. It's very nice to see people. Well, what would be really nice for me to see in the wedding industry is people to start giving less pictures. I think that is something that I really think needs to happen, because I feel like, I mean, I don't want to say what I think a right amount or wrong amount of pictures is, because people shoot on different film. There's different things, right? But I do think that what really makes photography strong is the way you put pictures together. Like one picture next to another, or how you present. In video, it's something you have to do because that's how you read it. But in photography now, we just, people are whacking out like thousands of pictures, and it's just a stop frame animation sometimes. And you're like, that's not storytelling. That's just worried that you're not getting it right. There's a difference, right? You need to like being decisive and creating a story, because I think with weddings or with any photography, people aren't, well, I think this about my way of thinking about this. I don't think people hire me to capture their day. And I'm not particularly interested in capturing their day. I think people hire me to capture their day the way I see it. And I'm interested in how their day looks to me, not how they're going to think it looked to them at the time. I'm shooting for later. So I think that kind of way of thinking about it is kind of narrative based. You're like, well, how do I shoot this and put this next to it to create this feeling that I feel at the time, or I want them to feel later? It's not necessarily about what it is at the time. And I think that's a different thing. I think that narrative needs to come back, and because of our social media platforms, it's very hard to keep it, but it's important.
Yeah.
We've had a couple of conversations about content creators. I don't know if you've worked with one before, but we've started doing content creation on the side, right? So usually I have my rig, and there's a 360 camera for our social media. There's my camera with a monitor, and then there's a phone doing content creation. Our job is absolutely ridiculous when I think about it. It's, honestly, but in my head, I've realized that it's helping the panicker in me, who wants versus the creator in me, right? So take the preps, for example, right? In my head, in my edit, I'm trying to tell a story of the bride getting ready, but at the same time, I want to tell the story of the groom and how he hasn't seen his bride yet, and you know, build that anticipation up to when you first see her walking down the aisle, which could be 6 minutes into a film. So in my head, I don't want to see the bride at all in the edit.
Yeah.
I can hint at her, I can shoot in mirrors, and you know, oh, there's her silhouette, she's getting ready, but I don't want to see her. And that's a lot easier when I can just grab my phone and go, there's the bride getting ready. And it doesn't need to be part of the footage. So actually, you know, if you're thinking about all the bad things about content creators, think of all the good things that they can now offer you. The freedom to not have to.
It's helping you not overshoot.
Document and overshoot. Yeah. So I don't know.
No, massively.
Just a thought there, but
no, I think you're on it there. I think the thing is with it now is that we at the sort of place where, because we do. You know, we can shoot indefinitely, so we do. And then you see, like, now there's a big swing back, guys shooting back on film and kind of restrictions, right? And I think that's a big thing that's really important. I think creativity comes with restriction. When I was younger, I used to think creativity came with freedom, but I don't think it does. I think give someone a prime lens with a thing that shoots at like f8 and 125s and go nuts. Now make a wedding. I reckon you'll have a banging wedding. I honestly reckon you'll have a beautiful... You'll be forced to work hard for those pictures. You'll have to think on the spot. Yeah. You'll have to work, and you'll make something really special. The limitation is where the creativity comes in. It's not about like I can shoot on any camera with any lens, as many as I like, wherever I want. That is a nightmare for me. I know myself. Like I want the least amount of options possible with my equipment. I want to shoot with. No, I don't want to have to think about anything else than what's in that frame and how am I going to make it work. That's what I want. Yeah. And I think that's the problem with what we've got now is we've got endless options in any way, shape, or form. And I think that's a very difficult way for photographers to kind of nail a style or kind of like stand behind their work and be like, I'm super proud of this, because you kind of shooting like, well, I could give it that one, or I could have given it that one, or I could do it like that. Let me zoom in, let me shoot it wide, and then it's like, well, which one of those four options is you? Like, which one is you, man? Which one did you want to take? Yeah. And I think that's really important. When I do have, I don't often, I almost never shoot with second shooters, but not for any reason other than we have such different styles very often that I have no energy to edit all that. But like if we're being honest, you know, I'm not going to use that. So it's difficult. But if I do have someone who's a young photographer who really wants to learn, I give them a 50 mil, and that's it. You got a 50, not even a 35, right? Like a 35 is too much information. You can shoot landscapes and. Now the 50, work hard, man. Go get a portrait, go up. You want to get back, go back. And on the way there and back, you'll see a bunch more stuff than if you just stood there with your zoom and moved in and out, right? So work, get on there and work. And if it was up to me, I'd make it a manual focus, and they'd have like 132 gig card for the whole wedding. And that's it. Delete on the spot, bro. Yeah. You didn't like it, get rid of it.
I think that was a valuable lesson for us to learn in our career. Being filmmakers, like there's all sorts of like camera gear, and does it shoot at this and this frame rate, and then you've got the supporting gear, monopods, tripods, gimbals, drones. Oh, there's a new drone next month. There's a fucking new drone in 2 months down the line. It gets absolutely ridiculous with the amount of kit. And when I was brave enough to take off the zoom lens and get rid of my glide cam, and just shoot handheld with a 35 all day. Man, I was the same as you. I'm like, I just feel so, like my brain is just different. It's active. It's in the moment. It's, and limiting yourself also gives you first of all, it speeds you up, so you can actually, you already know the kind of frame in your head. If you know a 35 or a 50, you go in and you get it. But it also gives you time to build on relationships and your approach to how you are as a physical being in this intimate space, which is a wedding.
Yeah.
And that's really important. Because we've said it all the time on this podcast. It's, if you create a great experience on a wedding day, that will, those emotions do translate to when the couple see them and they're like, oh yeah, I remember that. And they feel the image.
But there is another side to this, though, that I wanted to say quickly about digital photography. Is sometimes I mean photographers have this uber pride in that they shoot digital, but they don't shoot a lot of pictures. And I'm like, but hang on a second, right? No, wait a second. Because I come from a film photography background. That's my background. So, with photography, with film, you just don't have that luxury of shooting endlessly. So, in a street photography situation, say I can see, I don't know, there's a couple in the corner and there's a kid and a dog. And I really want a complex frame, right? Where it's going to be foreground, background, whatever. It's going to be layers through this thing. As a film photographer, or as any photographer, the thing that I'm watching is the body language of the people. Because you can't just start firing on film because there's no picture yet. But there could be, right? You see the potential for it. That's what you're waiting for. So you wait. And the second it's good enough to take that picture, you take it. Because you don't know if it's going to dissipate a second later, right? So you take the first one on film. And if you're lucky, you might get another 2 frames of that thing. And then you're like, hey, I've got it. I don't have time. I can't spend 10 frames on this. So I'll move on, right? But my way of thinking about digital photography is different. I think of it as a pyramid. So I see the moment happening and I start to shoot because I don't know when it looks a good enough image to take. It's not an image, right? It's a good enough image, but it's not a great image yet. But you start shooting, boom, boom, and you watch this thing evolve till it peaks, right? But you don't know it's the peak until you shoot past it. And then you go all right, at the top of that moment, that's the frame I want. The 10 leading up and the 10 leading down are irrelevant, but I had to shoot them for that one moment to know that was the peak. It was going to happen, right? For me, that's what digital photography gives me. It gives me this methodology of capturing a moment where I can decide the peak of it. Whereas with film, I cross my fingers and hope that was the peak. And go I got it good enough. And sometimes you get a banger and you're like, I nailed that. But you have no way of knowing that the next frame wasn't going to be better. You just live with it. Whereas with digital, I think it's insane to be we have this opportunity to really manage these moments, to really kind of work them to the point and then be I only shoot 500 pictures a wedding. You're like, well, fuck, then go shoot film, bro. What's the point?
Another thing that new photographers struggle with, and I think it comes from what you were talking about, where it's we look at others too much, is pricing. Though they don't know what to price themselves at, so just look at the industry and go, oh well, they're charging that, so I need to be similar or undercut or go higher because I want to appear better. So what's your approach to sort of landing on your pricing and how you got there?
I think it's difficult because South Africa is obviously a different kettle of fish because our exchange rate is relative to everything else, So I shoot a lot of weddings here, but my international pricing and my pricing for South Africa are very different. But I definitely find with South Africa, I've been very lucky in that my price bracket is I do tend to get the type of brides that I really like to work with, which is they have some money, but they're not 500 people, 3-day events. They they really prioritize photography, put it that way. Their budget's breakdown is they're spending most of this money on photography and maybe a dress. Because I tend to find the type of bride that I have is those are the things that they're really into, the dress and the photos. So I don't have to compromise too much, but I would say my typical wedding is probably about between 80 and 120 people. And I'd say it's very often it's brides from the creative industry, often. They other videographers or photographers or filmmakers or that kind of thing. But then I also do shoot on the other side, big sort of Jewish weddings, and that's a whole nother kettle of fish, right? Actually, one of the things that's happened recently, which is the sweetest thing ever, is like there's a planner, and they probably like one of South Africa's biggest planners, and they do these incredible weddings, like massive weddings, 500 people, big weddings, right? And I do not want to be the primary shooter on that ever. It's just not my cup of tea, right? But what's great is, because you've got clients with big enough budget, they'll hire another 2 photographers. They'll hire the guy and his assistant. Then I get this gig, which is called the third eye photographer, which pretty much means I get to shoot whatever I want at my full rate, which is the best gig in the world, right? It's like the ultimate
I love
gig.
that.
Yeah, so you get to go around and be like, you need the guy who's going to do the family photographs and the kiss and the coming down the aisle and all of the things you got to get. But my job is to wander around the fringes, which is what I'm best at, actually, and shoot the things that I see specifically that other people wouldn't potentially notice. And I think it's such a great, if you've got the budget, it's the best. It's the best.
Yeah.
And for me, it's no pressure because
so
I
cool.
love shooting that stuff. Like, it's what I want to shoot.
Yeah. Have you heard
Do you
of
think that? I've heard there's someone else who spoke to, I don't know whether it was maybe John Dolan that had that experience as well.
Yeah,
but
man.
do you find that then it's the parents who are booking the other photographer and then the couple who are interested in your style? Yeah.
Definitely. Like I was saying, like I've never ever had a comeback from a bride saying like, I don't like the photos, right? They always state. I had quite a few comebacks from the mother of the bride being like, this is not what we expected. This is not, like, why is it blurry? Like, why does this? You're like, okay. It's like, what are you supposed to do? But also you feel kind of bad because you're pretty sure they paid for it too. And you're like, well, I don't know what to tell you. It's speak to your daughter, so it's a tough one. But yeah, it's an interesting space to work in there.
Yeah. So I'm assuming you have like a flexible kind of pricing structure then, considering.
I'm pretty. I have like very. Like I have very set prices. Like I have a 10-hour package, a 5-hour package, and an international package, pretty much. Right.
Cool.
Like, and I find like with international packages, if it's Europe, America, Asia, or anywhere, I just kind of like I have no energy for this finicky. This is what it's gonna cost, right? That's what that's it.
Yeah.
And I'll take the hit sometimes, and I'll make more money sometimes, but I'll just kind of that's what it costs. I am the worst at all. I don't know if you guys have interviewed Melody Joy. Have you ever interviewed Melody?
Melody, we've shot with her before and had her twice on the podcast.
Yeah. So Melody, we did a talk together in France, man. And I was chatting to her. And I'm like, Melody, you and me are complete opposites because you know exactly what the hell is going on with everything, right? She's like, she's got a system and she understands it. Like I feel like I am just winging this all the time from start to finish, right? Like, and I'm always impressed when I meet someone who's got like a plan and a structure. I can be like, why do you charge that? And they're like, because of these things. And I'm like, yeah, man, I never even thought about those things. No idea.
Yeah.
I'm like, got it.
It's a funny one because Melody is one of these photographers who actually charges like a hefty amount. Most would consider a hefty amount, right? It's about 10 grand, is it?
Yeah, I think she's about there.
I think that's her pricing. I can't remember what she said in the podcast. And I think to a lot of photographers that's quite a lot of money per wedding. And I mean, it is. But if you speak to Melody, she does know exactly where that money is going to and how much she needs for this and that. And I do think it's a skill. I definitely think it's a skill.
Yeah,
that she's very strong.
And Melody is a marketing G, dude. Like she knows her target audience. She puts it where it needs to be.
Yeah.
Like she puts the ball on the fairway where it needs to be. Like that's what she's banging at, right? Like I'm just hurling it out from somewhere, landing it wherever. So it's a different thing, man. But it's true. It's like, and I think also, when you start dealing with those kind of amounts. I mean, coming from South Africa, so I always have to charge under what I reckon the sort of like upper end is of the international photographer in the country that I'm going to. Because I'm a risk, right? South Africans, no one likes us. Visas are a bastard. So you've got to say to someone like, I could come to your wedding if I get the visa, right? Because there's no way of knowing if I'm going to get denied. So I'm a flight risk to start with. So I'm like, listen, bro, so I'm going to have to undercut to offset the uncertainty of me never pitching up on your day. I have to be less than the guy who's like, you don't like his work as much, but he's a sure bet, right? You got to be like, just under there, because if you're the same amount, they're like, it's just not worth the risk. What if he doesn't show up? But you got to be like, oh, we really want Matt. And for that amount, it makes sense for me and it makes sense for them. That's that's the truth, you know. So it's it's a long way to go. Also, being in South Africa, like everywhere is far, everywhere.
Yeah,
True.
Yeah, so it's not like a nip over to Europe.
You're saying that you want photographers to deliver less photos. So what are you delivering? Like, is it online gallery only?
Yeah.
And
so I just do online gallery, and I'd say like it's a minimum of 400 photos, and I'd say a maximum of, like, depending on the wedding, I got to say, like, some weddings are just either the light is just so good, or just so. Actually, you know what? The defining factor is, are there children or dogs? If there's kids and dogs, you're going to get more pictures, right? But that's truly, man. I will shoot those all day. So I reckon it's between 400 and 700, I'd say, but I'd say on average about 500. And that's your 10-hour package. And like, I don't do books or albums or any of that, just because I come from my own work. I make books, and I just know that, like, I would get so deep down that rabbit hole. In an ideal world, though, like in my ideal world of what I deliver, I would say I give you a book with 100 pictures in it, of which you'd only see when you get the book. It's finished, made. There are no comebacks. There's nothing else, and you never see any of the other pictures. That 100 that I choose is what you get, and you'll love it. But I want to be in control of the whole thing from start to finish. I don't want any. I just have there's no way I could make albums with people. There's no chance.
Yeah,
so I don't.
I know a lot of people don't like albums just because it can take them so long. But
I think because I come from this, like, very my own personal work is very narrative based. So it's super important to me, like, how this flows, right? And someone's like, we just got to stick. You're like, we need a picture of Marge. You're like, Marge does not fit in this book. Like, Marge is out.
Okay, Marge, get out of here, Marge.
Marge is not in the book, unfortunately. Like, actually, I took no pictures of Marge. There's none of her, so it doesn't matter. Like, it's just how it is.
Hey, I'm Ashley from With Jack. I'm one of the sponsors of the Perspective podcast. With Jack helps to keep photographers in business by supporting them financially and legally if they have problems with a client or they make a mistake in their work. We've all had that fear of our CF card or our hard drive failing and losing important photos. You can find out more at withjack.co.uk. Head over there and find out how we can help you be a confident creative.
With that storytelling in mind, do you blog? Well, first of all, are you good at blogging? Do you blog a lot?
No.
No.
No. Listen, guys. Like, if we could still send letters by hand, I would do it. You know, like, that's my social media is on the, like, what it has to be to survive in the industry, and that is about as close as I've got. You know. Like, I'll be honest. I'm not a blogger.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I ask, because I've spoken to so many people who are just like, I know I got to do it, but I haven't done it yet. And I know our listeners, I know a lot of you out there are thinking, I know I should have blogged. I probably should have blogged last week when I said I was going to blog, didn't get around to it. Probably not going to blog for a while. Get blogging, people. It's no, but my thought was, because of that storytelling aspect, you were saying you're approaching a book. I'm assuming you'd very much do the same thing. You'd have all those little moments that kind of lead up and tell a story of a particular moment. Yeah. I see a lot of amazing photographers, and I also see a lot of amazing photographers who do and don't do this, but in their gallery, you can really tell the photographers who have a keen eye for that sense of like non-linear storytelling.
Definitely.
And I really I could spend a long time on that kind of blog and really seeing the stories play out. Whereas you can definitely tell it's a lot less intriguing if it's just like bang, 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 here's a group, here's a group, here's a group, same group. Why is there like 5 of the same group? What's going on here? Why is there like multiple of the same images? It's weird, but it's
But it is, I think the thing is that I think a lot of photography, a lot of wedding photography, especially when you're starting out, is sadly based off of fear. So you're like, what if the bride doesn't like this picture? What if whoever in the portrait doesn't look right? So I'm going to give you 5 options of it because I don't want the comeback of someone saying they're not happy with how they look. And I mean, that's sort of the nature of the beast, really. I mean, you've got to, but I do think that you have to kind of hold your ground sometimes and like, you call it. Like, that's what a photograph is. It's a moment in time and that's what you look like. So take it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's get back onto your style of photography.
Okay.
Hello, traffic. Can you if I was to ask you to describe your photography style, like how would you go about it?
I mean, I'd say it's documentary. I mean, I'd say like in a very broad sense. I mean, like I shoot a lot of candid stuff, but I also. But then saying that, I do kind of have like an editorial touch to it for sure, like when I shoot the bride or whatever, like there's a bit of an overlay there of a bit of fashion. I shoot a bit of fashion and I shoot a bit of, but I think you either like I think with my work, I'm either doing one or two things where I'm either like capturing something moving, or I'm shooting something that is still that I want you to look harder at, right? So I like this combination of like complex frames with layers, lots of busy images. Or there's like very slow images where I want you to see just one thing, where I want you to look more carefully at something than just what it is. And I think I like the balance between these two things of like street style, where I'm shooting a lot from the hip sometimes, or a lot of blur or whatever, like very quick movements. And then there's also stuff where I will put something that's quite mundane front and center, but I want you to look at it because there's something more there than just what it is of. And I think that's kind of how I like to play with imagery. I don't know if that's a good answer.
Yeah.
But I don't know, like it's a terrible question when people ask you, like, what would you describe your style as? It's like, well, I know, it's like, it's everyone asks you that. Everyone asks everyone that. And it's a very difficult answer. It's like, well, it's photography, but you're just reaching in weddings for so many genres to create this thing. That it's not pure. I mean, some people surely are pure documentary, and some people I'm sure are different. But I definitely feel like I borrow from many different worlds, to make kind of.
It's one of those things that describing your own photography, we all kind of have to do on our own website and stuff. And like, we had a note here that I think on your website it's talking about storytelling and poetry, and then like, there's a bit where like. You mentioned you like good photography more than wedding photography, and we've kind of touched on that already. Like, what does that
Someone
actually mean
put
to
a
you?
post up on it was on Instagram, and they tagged me, and it was like, I think it was with Thrive. They said the quote was like, "There's no such thing as good wedding photography." Or I just like the term wedding photography. There's only good photography and bad photography. Big letters underneath it, Matt K. And I was like, oh, Christ. So then. All these guys started commenting and like, what? No. And I was like, I think we need to put this in context. Like, I think wedding photography is good photography. I'm not saying that like I'm saying like you're a good photographer. That's the point, right? There's good photographers because they achieve what they set out to do. Whether it's a wedding or a street or whatever. If you do what you intend to do and you do it well, you're a good photographer. But I hate that like, you're a wedding photographer and like you're a architecture photographer. If you're a good photographer, mate, you'll figure it out. Or you'll find your style will cross between genres. Like, I think that's my point is like, it's more like I don't like people who call themselves wedding photographers limiting themselves to like, we just wedding photographers. You're not. If you're a good wedding photographer, you are a good photographer, man. You can shoot anything after that. Like, you can go work on any project and you'll be fine. You will figure it out. And I think that's more what I was saying is that, like, we mustn't, as an industry, like, downplay ourselves and be like, well, we're just wedding photographers. You're bloody not, mate. If you're a good wedding photographer, you are a very good photographer, generally speaking, in any genre.
So it's the intention behind an image that makes it a good image.
Yeah, I think not necessarily. Sometimes you get lucky and you're like, I don't think I intended that, but that is a great image. But like, I think like that you get those, but you only get those by risking and making mistakes, you know. And I think that's more my point. Is like, you get great images by taking chances. You don't really get them by playing it safe. And you have, and sometimes you have to play the safe card. Or the, you know, weddings are that kind of thing where you need to put the safe bets down. But I do think that like you get great images by rolling that dice, you know.
And I suppose, there is intention in choosing to roll the dice as well.
No, that's exactly.
You might not. You might not know what the final outcome is going to be, but you are putting the intention behind something being there, even though you don't know what it is.
And then, but then you've got to then notice it in the post-production. You've got to notice that is a good photograph, and I captured that there.
The post-production is, I mean, I think everyone who's in the industry and knows this, but I think it's the most important part. Like, I've edited weddings for people, like friends of mine who've, like, their mate shot the wedding just as a favor, and they were like, Matt, can you edit this thing? And I didn't shoot it. But I'm looking at it and I'm like, I'm pretty sure the guy who shot this doesn't know that is a banging photo, right? It's a total mistake, but it's an absolute win, right? And like, I think being able to like, if you're in the world of photography long enough, you look at enough stuff and you can kind of like reference from different genres and be like, that image, like intentional or not, is really good. And I think like being able to select in the way that you want to tell a story. It's not to say that there's good and bad images, but images that work for your way of speaking visually is a real skill, man. That is where I think it's the hardest skill. That I think is the hardest skill to teach. You can teach people to shoot. That's really hard.
Yeah. I think as well too, the fact that there are so many lots to buy, and you know, even I saw a website. What was it called? I can't remember, but it was like you can pick any image, throw it in, and it'll pump out the information. Like, it'll learn all the information that you can then apply to any image. And I'm like, you're getting rid of such an important thought, like an important process that I feel like you need to learn. And I'm not the best at coloring, but it's always in my mind that color palettes should vary in images, because the emotional content in every image should be different. Because you should be exploring all the emotions at a wedding. So
and color is such an interesting way of telling a story just on its own, you know. So like it's interesting, when I built the presets for my work, which I've kind of used for probably the last 5 years or so, I grew up reading with my mom. We used to read these children's books, and there was an illustrator called Arthur Rackham. I don't know if you ever heard of this guy. He did like
yes.
Well, he did like J.M. Barrie. He did like Peter Pan and all of these kind of things. But he has these very specific sort of tones, right, around the turn of the century. And these kind of tones are what my childhood kind of idea of like storytelling was. This is how I think. And when I built the kind of colors that I responded to, I didn't do it intentionally. I didn't go like, Arthur Rackham, let's build this thing. But when I looked at the kind of palettes that I was using, I was like, I'm recreating these tones in my own way, in what I do, because that's how I associate stories and narrative and a bit of fantasy. Because I would definitely say my work tends to like, I'm not really interested in telling you the truth of the day at all. I'm just interested in telling you what I think it looks like today.
Yeah.
I'm having a look at Arthur Rackham's work, and I can see the inspiration in some of your images. Which is cool.
What's your approach? Because obviously with film and digital within the same sort of gallery or whatever, how do you balance those two together?
I mean, it's a tough question, right? So I won't lie. This is probably not going to sell me any weddings, but if it's up to me, I don't want to shoot film and digital. I don't want to do it because my mindset changes dramatically between the two. And for my problem with it is if I start shooting digital, I forget to shoot film. And if I start shooting film, I'll shoot the whole roll before I switch back to digital. Because it's like really difficult for me to, I know my mind works in two very different worlds. Like my own personal work, I shoot on like medium format, sometimes 4x5, real slow. And I shoot on a little 35mm Rolly SC, which is like this little pull-out lens. It's like the same width. It's like tiny.
Oh, yeah.
And it's got just a viewfinder. It's not linked to the lens. So you get a lot of like hit and miss stuff, which I love, you know. That's what I shoot. But when I shoot digitally, I'm very like digital. I'm like, right, let's shoot that moment up to the peak and past it. Like I switch very quickly between the modes, but it's very difficult for me to like choose one and the other. So what I'll do is if I have to do it, I'll be like, all right, for the portrait session, we're going to shoot on a medium format, and I'll shoot that thing like that. But I can't do this thing one. Like I know there's some photographers out there who are really good at shooting on like 6 cameras in a day. I am not that guy. Like I am simple, man. I need one thing. Just give me one. I don't. It's enough with one. But I'm really impressed with people that can like shoot on a whole bunch of different stuff, because I'd love to do that, but I just know myself well enough to know that like I'll get too invested in one of them. Like if I'm shooting on a Holga, I'm going to shoot the wedding on a Holga, and I want to shoot. And then the narrative to me means, how do we tell stories with Holgas? Like how do I tell stories with medium format, right? Or how do I use a Holga in between medium format images? Like how do you link these types of styles? Then it becomes a whole different way of kind of like thinking. And I find I'm just not multitask enough for that. So if I do shoot film, you're going to have a film section, and then we're going to go back to digital.
Yeah. I mean, have you ever been asked to shoot too? And then if so, like, would you shoot like the preps in film, or would you keep that for just the portrait session?
No, I mean, ideally I'd like to keep like the film camera on and kind of create its own little narrative with the film. So if you got rid of all the digital images, you could have a story running through it with the film. But the truth is, it's never going to happen. Yeah. But the other side of it is like, and I don't want to like blow my own horn here, I'm damn good at creating black and white to look like film. I'm good. Like it's good enough, right? No one is gonna know. So people come and they're like, "Oh man, can you shoot on film?" I'm like, bro, yeah, no worries. But like, it's like if you want the negatives, it might be a problem. It's difficult because it's like I know shooting on this camera with this lens, graded this way, it's what you want. It's what you want. It's just. You've decided that you want film because it's a thing now. And I'm like, but actually, if I just show you a really good Portra 400 preset, like done right, you won't know the difference, man. No one but like I will know the difference, because I'm the guy who's like looking into the grain to go like slightly more, slightly less. But no one is going to know the difference. I mean, I'm just going to be that guy that says it. I think it's a trend. And I think if you're going to shoot on film, shoot the whole wedding on film. Own it. Shoot the thing. Change your mindset. Use the film like a storytelling device, restriction, create that kind of way of working. Or shoot digital and like make it look like film if people want it. Like that's their vibe, go for it. But I mean, there's definitely people that can do both. I can't do it.
Yeah. By the way, fucking right. Toot your own horn, absolutely.
Well,
you have that confidence.
If you want to, I grew up shooting black and white film, right? Like I grew up shooting black and white film. I know what tri-X looks like. I know what push tri-X look like. I know how it works, right? So I can. I got good at looking at digital and going like, well, I can't afford to shoot on film, but I love the look of it. But what's the difference? At the end of the day, when it's a print in a book or on your wall or whatever it is, knowing it was shot on film or not knowing it was shot on film, like it's one of these things that really gets me, is like how you got to the image with what camera and what lens and all that is important for photographers to know, because you need to know. But for the client, they don't need to know.
Yeah.
You on your website you describe yourself as a big guy with a big beard.
That's
so
true.
I'm intrigued to, like, you're obviously aware of that part of yourself. How does that translate into you at a wedding? Like, are you aware? Are you like trying to hide away, or do you embrace your?
I think I've definitely got a. If you spoke to the brides that I've shot, I think I've got a switch where I'm surprisingly good at being discreet and in the background, and like no one notices me. But I can also definitely run a show if I need to. Like there's definitely a side of where I can like, right, the light's going, we need to make something happen, or we need to move. Like I'm as much as I am a fly on the wall, I have nothing against like walking into a room and taking all the pictures down and moving the furniture around and like saying, no, you can't get ready there, you're getting ready there. Like there's a level of control with weddings where I'm like, if you want that photograph, you need good light. If you want good light, you can't sit there. We got to move. So like, I think there is definitely an aspect where I can, in moments like the reception where there's lots going on and there's lots of ways I can move freely, I can very much be a fly on the wall. When it's restricted and controlled and I need to create imagery because it's not happening, I can switch quite quickly. But I'm never like forceful. I don't think I'd ever be like talked about as like someone who's like kind of in your face about it. I feel like I'm very good at crowd management and people wrangling. You get good at that with weddings, right? You learn it. It's a skill. It's a huge skill. Like when to step in and when to step out.
Yeah. I think maybe that comes with, you know, your work with film, because obviously there's no like post-production with, well, I mean, there could be post-production if you get the digitals, but like, you know, you have to have that kind of, I don't have Photoshop approach to things. And that's obviously being in video, we've never had Photoshop. So it's very much that was something that we learned very quickly, is how do we control a scene without appearing like we're putting ourselves into the wedding?
Control a scene without affecting it.
Yeah.
So
I'd be super curious to ask you guys, like working with photographers, because so obviously I work with a lot of videographers, you know. So I love working with videographers because it just sounds terrible. I like working with videographers who do not shoot like me. I don't want someone who's like me. I want someone who wants to take control, wants to do stuff, because I love the fringes of that. I love a video when a videographer says, "Okay, let's dance, like stand together." Because as a videographer, you got to make them do something. Otherwise, just standing there. As a photographer, just standing there looking awkward can be beautiful, right? So like, I love it when I have a videographer who wants them to do things. They're like, "Come, girls, let's jump on the couch," and I'm like, "I would never make you jump on the couch." But if that guy wants you to jump on the couch, I'm not going to shoot the picture of you all jumping on the couch like this. But I'm going to shoot around the edges of this. I'm going to shoot your feet jumping off the couch. I'm going to, because as a photographer, what I really want is people to be doing something. And when you work with a videographer that's also a fly on the wall, you're like, mate, we might need to actually get these people to do something. Like, you know, nothing's happening, right? So when I get a videographer that's very different, like completely controlling and like totally, I'm like, great, this is great, because I know that the pressure's off me and I get to shoot the fringes, which is what I want.
Yeah.
And you guys with photographers, like, how's it work for you guys?
I mean, it's funny because we started this podcast because every wedding we are working with photographers.
Sure.
And seeing the different approaches was so interesting. And then I realized, hang on, like, photographers are going to workshops and they don't have this kind of almost like a privilege of working alongside all these amazing photographers. So it's kind of like a workshop every time we go to a wedding. Yeah. But we love being creative and putting our ideas forth, and it's very much a collaboration. So if I'm working with a photographer and they don't feel like we're best buds by the end of the day, I feel like I've had a bad day. Like, that is unlike me.
Yeah, I get that.
I get to play, because we work as a duo, I'm like sort of the second shooter. So I get to play the role that you were talking about there, where if Simon's getting the group to do something, then I'll be shooting on the fringes, or if the photographer's setting up a scene, I'll be on the fringes as well. So we get the best of both, where I can shoot around the fringes and he can get the main sort of center shot or whatever.
And it definitely leads to your personality, because if one person likes to take that role, like some people don't like not feeling in control, you know, they want the structure. And I love that. When I find a video, my worst is when I get to a videographer and they're super like nice about it, and I'll be like, "So listen, man, like, we're so easygoing. We just want you, you know, you take the lead, man. We'll follow you." And I'm like, "We're fucked. We're fucked."
Yeah.
Like
I think a lot of video people have that as kind of like a standard, especially during the portrait session, where it's just like, I'll just shoot over the photographer's shoulder. And I think, oh, that's such a disappointing thing to hear other filmmakers say, because I'm like, be creative. Otherwise, you're just like
Also, I shoot quick. You ask any bride, like my couple shoots are like 15 minutes. Like, let's walk to that tree, whack it out, bang, bang, turn around, come back, and I got backlight, bang, bang, let's go back to the reception, have a party. Like, let's do that. And the videographers are like, oh, meanwhile, and the wedding planners come and pack the basket with champagne and food, and I'm like, just keep that. Don't worry about it, man. Like, no one's going to eat it. Put it away. We'll be back. Before the champagne's cold, man, it'll be fine. Like, just like, and I think videographers that work with me, I think would probably have that to say. They'd be like, no, if you're going to shoot with Matt, you need to take your gap when he gives it to you, because if you're not gonna do anything, I'm going to be like, wrap it up, let's go back. Because I want you to be hanging out with your mates. That's what I want.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I was getting the last one that we shot, because we had 2 weddings this week, but the last one, it was raining all day, and it was really upsetting for the bride. But just after dinner, the sun came below the clouds, and there was a beautiful sunset. And me and Mark Pecura, we were like thinking about, they don't want to go that far away, but we're in a shadow pocket essentially. Yeah. And I'm like, I think we should go up there. I think we should do it. And very quickly, Mark and I were just like, boom, let's get the cars up the hill into the sun, and we got like 10 minutes of just beautiful sunset. Yeah. And I think, because the weather affected the bride so much, I think she will absolutely love those images.
Totally.
And just the fact that you don't even need to go far. Yeah. And you don't even need to spend that long. Very much like you want the party to continue. You don't want the couple to feel like they're missing out on this wedding because it's a party and they want to spend their time with their friends. Go out quickly, do what you need to do. You only need a handful of these kind of images.
Yeah. And I definitely think like
gallery and just,
I don't know. I think like, because a lot of weddings, like you see, like especially elopements, right? There's like these incredible scenery, like that's the point, right? But at a lot of venues in South Africa, it's very beautiful, right? But it's a bit of a one-trick pony. It's like, there is the mountain. We've got a shot with a couple in front of the mountain. Now we've got the mountain, right? Let's get out of there because I don't need to shoot more mountains. So, but I think my strongest work is much more about a patch of light than it is about a beautiful landscape. So it'll be like, I will look very close to the venue and be like, at this time, that wall or those flowers are going to be enough. Like, because you don't want to compete. Like, for me, I don't necessarily want in portraits especially, I don't want the bride to be competing with the mountain, right? Like, you're going to lose. Yeah. So you might need that one photograph, that epic wide, but after that, like, just find a nice patch of light and just work with that, because you can do an incredible amount of work with one good patch of light. And I find like, if we don't have to go far to find that light, I'm going to stay as close as I can and work that little patch of light or 2 or 3 little spots. And I'll often will tell them, like, and planners hate me because I'm like, don't worry about the couple shoot. When the light's good, I'll just go call them. Like, and they're like, yeah, but the couple shoot is from this time. I'm like, that's cool. Let them hang out with their mates. And when the light looks right, I'm going to grab them for 5 minutes, man. No one's going to complain for like 5 minutes. It's going to be out of there, So I think that's kind of like, it sometimes messes with their idea of how a wedding should run. But I do think as a photographer, you need to be very, and I think it's a good lesson for young photographers. Like, there isn't a right way or a wrong way to do this. Like, there isn't a, the wedding planner's job is to plan this thing as seamlessly as possible. But your job as a photographer is also to create the best work you can on the day. And if that means going, guys, let's dash out 5 minutes now, let's do it. You don't have to stick to that timeline, because if the light's wrong, it's wrong. Let them enjoy their time with their friends. You'll get better pictures. Yeah. That's my idea anyway.
Yeah. What would you say to photographers who are thinking, yeah, I'd love to do that, but what happens if my couple don't want to come out when the light's good and I haven't gotten anything earlier? Like, what would you say?
Put a flash on, whack it when it's dark, find them on the dance floor. Like, to be honest, nice. some of the best stuff you're going to get is when because the thing is, a lot of couples are tense about a couple shoot, even though there's like the worst part of their day for them. They're worried about it. They only relax afterwards. They really do. Like, after the groom relaxes after the speech and the bride relaxes after that couple's shoot, because it's like where she has to still look good and like maintain composure and like all this kind of thing. And she's worried because these are the pictures. I sometimes make a very little deal about that shoot, and then when they've relaxed and on the dance floor, when they're like jamming and you just tell them you've got the most banging photos, whether you do or don't. You're like, guys, it was the best session ever, man. Don't worry about it. Then they're like, sweet, and the guard comes down completely, and then a little bit later you find them and be like, remember those rose bushes? Right, I'm gonna whack a hard flash on, get in there with the bushes, bang, 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 5 seconds, bam, 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 get back on the dance floor, but they're loose. And those pictures will be authentic and genuine and stressless because they know they've already, you've told them you already got it in the bag. So, you gotta, I sometimes think that's the way to go. Like, if they're not there for the perfect light, well, you're a photographer. Make it work somewhere else, mate. Carry on.
Yeah. Like, we so often trick the couple by like just at dinner going over and being like, we've already got gold in our cameras, but the light's amazing, so if you want to come out, come. But we're not bothered because we've got gold already, and they're always up for it. They're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And it was so interesting as well this week because we were also working with a couple of Italian photographers, and they didn't speak much English at all. So the communication between us was lacking on a language level, but creatively we were both like synchronized.
Yeah,
to be honest, like
one word, then you'd know what you were going to do, or gesture.
It was cool, but what we did have one conversation during dinner, very slowly. And they were saying that in Italy, they have a shoot that's like an hour long, and that's it.
Yeah,
and I'm like, oh, interesting. I can imagine that being quite stressful if you can't find the light in that very particular moment, or. Yeah, it's just interesting.
I think it's
cultural
I think you have
differences,
to.
I suppose.
Yeah, I think there's a thing when you travel overseas. Like suddenly it's like the UK, right? Like the first couple of weddings I shot in the UK, I was like, so there's like 30 guests here at the function, and then dinner is like 100 of those rock up for like a post party thing, right? And I was like, whoa, like this is very different, right? It doesn't work like that. So back home for us, so it's quite South African weddings are quite structured. I got to say, like they all kind of follow a very similar timeline, more or less. Even though everyone thinks they're doing it their own way, it's like it's not. And then you go to like Romania or something, or Greece, and you shoot like a completely different vibe. And I really love that. I find that like I shoot my best work. Two things that I know when I do my best work is a new venue. Like I really like the first time I shoot a venue is the best I shoot it, because I'm discovering while I'm going, right? Like I'm like thinking on the spot, so it's intuitive and instinctive. But the problem is if I've shot that venue once and it really worked well, the next time you get the brides, you kind of tend to, just also out of the sheer sort of like, you want to do the good job and you know that they like that picture, so you're going to do it again. And I really like going to a new location where I'm like forced to think how, like, I never go and look at venues online when people are like, this is the venue. If they've booked the venue, I never go and look at other people's wedding pictures of that venue, ever. And because you will see things differently, but if you've already seen where people have taken them, you're going to start manufacturing those shots subconsciously, I'm telling you. And I definitely think that that's a really, I will lose time with the bride in the morning to scout the place out. Like I will take an hour out of bride time, like getting makeup and stuff done, to really look hard around the venue and bank a couple of little places and go like, that was worth, and it's never not been worth it, you know? Like it's never not worth it.
I remember back in the day, this is actually blowing my mind that we actually used to do this, but if it was like a local venue to us, like I'm talking about the first year or two, we would go and actually go to the venue and scope it out.
Yeah.
What a tremendous amount of time.
I think a lot of people do that, man.
I can't believe we actually...
Yeah, I think a lot of people do that.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, like, just the lighting changes everything.
Totally.
At a venue. It's just absolutely no point to it. Yeah. But I suppose that's just lack of experience.
Yeah.
I do have one question before we go into show and tell.
Cool.
And I used to... I like to ask all of our Thrive guess this. Who do you shoot for? Do you shoot for yourself or do you shoot for the couple?
I shoot for myself. Like, I mean, I'm banking on the couple wanting what I do for me. That's my way of thinking. Like, the work that I put out there is work that I like, that I look for myself. And obviously, okay, but with that comes a caveat. Like, if I get there and the bride really is not my type of bride, and it's just she's booked you, and you're not going to just be like, well, I'm not going to do what you want, I'm going to do what I want. But I do think my way of looking at weddings is very much from my own, what I want out of the wedding. And I'm banking on, if I do a good job for me, the bride will be really happy, because those are the type of brides that typically book me, is someone who's looking for something a little bit different. They're not looking for like a tick the box kind of wedding. Like, I often send a thing out to brides. My email to brides is basically a checklist of things I don't do. It's like, I don't do ring shots. I don't do ring dresses hanging up in the window. I don't do shoes. I don't do any of that. If it happens to happen along the way, I'll shoot it, but do not send me a shot list ever. Like, it's just, if we're going to start off like that, it's not going to work. And I think, like, of course, send me a shot list of this people that you really want. Like, that's so-and-so from so-and-so, and I really need a picture. That's a different thing. But I'm not replicating other weddings for your wedding. Like, let's let your wedding be unique. Like, let us see what happens. Like, let's find out on that day what makes yours different. Like, let's figure it. So I definitely shoot for myself, man. I think weddings are a great place for me to find imagery that I really like. I don't get access to it any other way. And I think that's really important. One of the things that I've done over the years, I've got a folder where I just put images from weddings that is, I would consider, like, one day going to be a serious archive of serious work. One day. That's going to be, it's from a multiple weddings, but it's the story that I want to tell about South African weddings over multiple weddings. And that's kind of when I go shoot a wedding, I'm looking for the bride, but I'm also looking for shots that are going to fit into, like, this larger idea of these social rituals because I'm interested in that. Like, as a wedding, I'm interested in it as this performance and this ritual and these, like, there's so few things like that in our lives anymore, Like, we don't have many. This is one of the last ones that have tokens and significance and, like, dresses and flowers. Everything has a meaning to it, right? So there's so few things left in modern society that have that. So when I'm shooting weddings, I'm shooting for the bride so they can have memories of the day. But I'm really interested in the social side of a wedding and what it says about humans and, like, what it says about relationships and who we are today can really be like weddings. Like, the selfie culture, all of that stuff is really interesting to me at a wedding, right? Like, that's part of what I'm looking at when I go to a wedding. I'm looking at the guests, how they're acting. I'm looking at the dresses people are wearing. I'm referencing, was that something that happened before? Like, how do we do this? Like, what traditions do we let go of? Which ones do we hold? These things are really interesting in a long-term project for me. So weddings are a vehicle for a project as much as they are a sort of a way to kind of do a job that people enjoy and want the images from. It's a double up for me, I'd say.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Awesome.
Images,
let's go for it. I tend to do the show notes in order of when they happen. So as soon as you booked, essentially, I started making your show notes. So I actually can't remember what images of yours I've picked, Matt.
Sure.
All right. Okay. Yes, I do remember this one. Funnily enough, because you're talking about pushing people into bushes and stuff, something that we've also done in the past.
Classic
which,
Matt
has
K
confused
move,
couples.
My classic. Any bride I've ever shot is like, get in the bush. Just get in the bush. Just get in the bush.
Honestly, I freaking love pushing couples into bushes.
You're like, go further. No, further. They're further.
and they're like, but you can't see my face really at all. And you're like, that's cool. Carry on. Like, get in the bush.
Yeah. But the reason I like this is because, one, it's beautiful as a black and white image. But the flowers are almost the same sort of flowers as on her dress. And I don't know if you did this intentionally, but the fact that it's a very similar flower on the dress as to the flowers on the actual bush is what I find very appealing about this,
Yeah.
and also your framing with the black and the white and the black. But tell me about this image for you, like the behind the like your thought process in how you created this, and yeah.
Well, I think it's
If
just,
you can remember.
Yeah, no, I can. It was quite a there's a famous sculptor in South Africa, sculptor, a guy called Dylan Lewis, and he has a huge like property where he has these incredible, they're quite almost grotesque sculptures, right? They're like kind of anamorphic forms, and it's called the Dylan Lewis Sculpture Garden where they had the venue, and I think people's intuitive thing is to shoot people with these sculptures because it's kind of what it's about, right? But I like the bushes more. So I thought they were more interesting. So I think, but what's interesting about this, I mean, like it's an obvious, like for me, like the white flowers and the white dress was why I shot the picture. But what was important for me was to cut her head off, because then if you'd put her head in, you'd be fighting, right? You'd be fighting. You'd be looking at her, and the dress and the bushes become like a secondary thing. If you put someone's face in any picture, if you see someone's face, it's the primary thing you look at. It's what you determine the whole picture by. So when you get rid of it, composition becomes much more interesting, because you can tell stories in much more interesting ways with body language and that kind of thing. As soon as you put someone's face in there, like, how does she look? What do they look like? Who are they? These are different things. And another thing that's interesting about cutting people's heads off for marketing purposes is that if you shoot a really beautiful bride and you use these pictures as your marketing, a lot of people aren't necessarily these stunning, gorgeous model types, right? But you can just as easily imagine yourself as that person with your head on top as you can with like competing against some gorgeous model type, beautiful bride. When many people, like, they feel intimidated by that, by removing that aspect and being like, that could just as easily be me. A lot of people are like, I'd love that image to be from my wedding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. So it's almost like a marketing ploy.
Well, sort of.
Sneaky devil, you.
Hey, not just a pretty face, fellas.
No. This image,
You can't see who anyone is.
Yeah, this is the kind of.
So what were we saying?
This is the kind of image I love. Like that's the kind of image I love.
Yeah. This is the kind of image I love. First of all, you're dealing with really harsh light in a pocket of really harsh light, and it creates these beautiful, like almost abstract moments inside the frame, right? So like the hand over here, or the glass, or I mean, even something as silly as just her face that's covered up by the hand. You can see her mouth. I'm assuming the bride's mouth, but it actually might not be the bride's. I
have no idea who
tones of the. that's fine. There's definitely a theme of not being able to see brides in this. The textures that pop out and the colors that pop out in the light compared to what is hidden in the shadows. You can almost spend a long time just looking at this just to see what is hiding. It's like an Easter egg in a video game, or a movie. It's like, oh, this director put this here, but you're not really supposed to know it's there unless you spend time looking. So I kind of like that aspect of images like this. But tell me your thought process here.
Well, I think, when you've got like if you're going to, well, it's technical, right? Because when you've got those really high patches of those bright highlights, you can crank your aperture up to like f11, f16, which is often what I'll do, to kill those shadows black and pick up all the highlight. And because you're not shooting wide open, you get those strong shapes all the way through a frame, right? So you create a layered image based just off highlights. So I think, and what I start looking at is when you start getting into that mindset of looking just for the highlights in these contrasty scenes, you start playing with color, because it becomes irrelevant about like the sort of becomes about shape and color. You're basically abstracting that, and you're creating this like lack of depth because everything's in focus. And I think that's kind of when I started looking. I love those kind of images where there's these pockets of highlights, and you just really like wait for things to come into it, and I will find a patch of light like that, and I'll just stay dead still, and I'll just wait for people to walk in and out of it, and just wait. And I'll wait until it becomes complex enough that I think it's the right time to really like work it. But that kind of thing is I really love shooting.
So you'd shoot that with an aperture that's more closed.
Yeah, I shoot quite a lot. I shoot quite a lot at like I'd say like that kind of light. It depends on it. Like I'd say it's like 5.6 to like f16, somewhere around there, depending, right? But often I'll set it up at f11 and just go for it. And I'll pull. And so what I'll do is set it up like f11. I'll underexpose by 2 stops. So you're gonna black those shadows, and then I'm gonna just work that space until you kind of like. And this is what I'm talking about. Like if there's a dog and a kid and that kind of light, you just wait, because inevitably the two will meet in that light, and you're on the money, right? It's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
And that's where your sort of the crescendo of the moment is coming from. Like you obviously, I'm sure you had about 20 of these, and then
either side of that
post-production went, that's the one. You can see that from this image.
What's your thoughts on photographers that shoot with a black and white screen, like so they don't see color when they're taking the image?
I got to see the color. It's also I have no real way.
I lost you.
Yeah, sorry. Can you hear me now?
We might be having some
technical difficulties.
Sorry, Matt. I think we might be having some technical. Yeah, I think so.
And now, how are we doing?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I think we're back.
Okay, I think we're back. Okay.
What was your question?
Did you hear my question?
No,
Sorry.
Say it again if you don't mind.
Some photographers shoot with their screen on black and white, so they don't see any color, so they're just kind of forced to play with shapes and stuff. Like, do you think that's helpful for photographers, or do you think they should appreciate color and how to capture that?
I think it's up to the photographer, to be honest. I think everyone's got their own way of working. I think, like I said, growing up shooting like black and white film, but you still see everything in color, right? Like you're still looking through a viewfinder that's in color. So, I mean, switching, I don't ever shoot on a black and white screen or anything like that, because, I mean, the nice thing about shooting in a color screen is you're always going to have 2 options. I definitely decide in post what's black and white and what's color. Some images just lend themselves to one or the other. And I mean, certainly an image like that would probably work very well in black and white, but it's successful in color.
Yeah.
So I think, I don't know. I wouldn't limit your options. Like, I think if you have the options, take them.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, this image. Again, oh my God. Definitely a theme of me picking images where you've covered up the brides.
Yeah, I just want to say to all brides listening, do shoot portraits of your face as well. If you are listening, just saying.
Lies, don't listen to him. Lies.
So this actually was like a styled shoot. This was a styled shoot, but it's...
okay.
But it was an interesting one, this, because I had no intention of shooting the beekeepers at all. We just happened to be shooting in a garden where there were some beekeepers, right? Actually, I lied. They weren't even beekeepers. They were beekeeper outfits. That is the makeup artist and the stylist. That I was like, right. Well, we finished. We finished shooting this very boring shoot of this, model in a dress. Like, let's get them the beekeeping suits, because that's way more interesting, and let's do it again. So that's how that happened. But that's the kind of thing that I would I would say that's very borderline, where my personal work overlaps quite heavily, because that image could just as easily go into another world of mine. That's different. Mm-hmm. But I like to bring it into the weddings.
I one of the things I like about this is the greens. Yeah. I think a lot of people struggle, or maybe they used to struggle a lot, especially in Scotland, where there's so much fucking green. The people are almost. They're also a lot of photographers are trying to kill it off a little bit, and we're guilty of that. We try to kill off greens and make our images definitely more. We added a lot of kind of orangey amber tones into the green to kind of like dull them down. And I mean, we shoot Sony, so the greens are nuclear usually. So I am trying to desaturate the greens a little bit, but they still look green to me, or that's my attempt anyway. But I love the fact that you balanced the different shades of green, especially with the tree in the background. This kind of like darker shape over here. I like that.
I mean, I'm with you with greens, mate. Yeah. Like, I don't know. Like, sometimes you get them right, sometimes you get them wrong. And honestly, I couldn't tell you when that is. Like, it's just greens. That, like, mate.
It definitely is the toughest color to edit.
Yeah, and even on film, right? Like even on film.
Now
right?
that you say these beekeepers are not real,
No, that is a stylist and that is a hairdresser inside there.
yeah, I'm noticing that they don't have gloves on.
nothing.
They're doing gardening instead
Totally.
of beekeeping.
Absolutely.
Now that you say that, I'm noticing things going, hold on.
I'd love to tell you that this was.
notice that.
Yeah, no, it's a ridiculous image. I was like, when you popped up, I was like, strange choice, mate. But we'll run with that. Let's go. I like that image,
Yeah.
but I was
Yeah.
like, let's go.
I mean, there are. So usually I try to keep it to 3. You can move on to the next one, Greg. But I have a funny feeling I couldn't do that with yours, and that was one of the ones that I just couldn't get rid of. I just wanted to hear about the story, but this is probably another one. This is a black and white image, and I feel like you're just having fun with it.
Yeah.
That's the feeling that I get, that you're just like,
You guys are frozen a little bit.
you are trying to be funny with this image in the very cutest way, almost in a Dr. Seuss type, Lorax type of way. Like, I feel like you've given a body to this head, and it's just a big hairy bush. I don't know. There's something very funny about it to me. Do you remember this? image?
Yeah, that was in Romania actually. So I shot this wedding in Romania,
Oh, okay.
which was like in the middle of it was this really interesting wedding. It was an old casino or something. It was wild. It was a really beautiful wedding. But in amongst all the kind of, and this was like proper, like waiters in the white gloves, like it was full out, right? Full out.
Yeah.
And in amongst all this like craziness and this sort of like very perfect structure, there was just this guy, right? And if you can't see it, but to the left of where they are, the bride and groom are down the aisle. He's just to the right of everyone. So I'm at the back and I move to the side. And it just, I don't know. I think the thing with weddings is you got to like enjoy it, right? You got to still keep looking for things that make you smile and like enjoy you got to find things in the wedding that make you want to keep shooting. Like that's fun. Like otherwise, and it's still a good image though. It's still a good image, but it's
a great image.
Yeah, but it's fun enough that you can kind of like get away with it at weddings. Because there's so many ridiculous things at weddings. I mean, it's what makes them so brilliant is that they are insane, right? They're insane things, these things. They're ridiculous. And it's like, why not show it? It's part of the deal, right? We keep trying to make things look beautiful and make things look perfect, but they're not. And that's what the beauty of them is, right? It's the slight insanity of the whole thing.
Yeah. And is this a digital that you've used your masterful skill to look like film?
Yeah. Banging, eh? Told you.
Nailed it.
Yeah. Told you. Told you.
Next image. 5 images did I pick? Oh man, I was really being indecisive.
I think this is the last one.
All right.
Oh, this was my favorite image. To me, when I saw this, and I know obviously what I'm about to say doesn't really make sense because we all know how light works and what it does, but I got a very Peter Pan vibe with this, right? Like, this is her shadow and it's doing something playful and she's just not aware. And I almost in a fanciful, is that a word? Fantasy kind of vibe is what drew me to this image. Definitely not a perfect image. There's a little bit of motion blur. It's what's happening over here with the window and a hand popping in. Regardless, I absolutely love this image because it's so playful in a way that suggests that her shadow's doing something different. And I don't know, maybe I'm just making that up in my own head. Like, what was your thought process
I did need to
here?
just quantify something there. That's not her shadow.
Yeah.
Oh no, I know. Her shadow's actually, you can see over by the window. That's why I prefaced it by saying we all know how light works.
Okay, I'm just checking.
There's definitely light coming from.
I didn't want to burst your bubble or like really put a spanner in the magic of this image, but that's not actually her shadow. Okay, all right.
But that's what I like about it because
I know.
my brain's like, that is her shadow because it's the closest thing to her. But I know, as obviously,
But I mean, this is
I know
just
how light
another.
works. So
This is another case of just finding. I mean, I honestly think the best advice I'd give any photographer is just find good patches of light and just wait for things to come into them. Like, back the light, right? Trust your gut. If that thing looks like something's going to happen in it, it probably will. Just wait. Stop forcing it. Just wait, it'll happen. And this was just two kids playing, but the nature of the light, you knew eventually one of them was going to come into there, and you'd either get like a complicated shadow where they would cross and it'd be an interesting shape, and you'd get this like, or you'd get something with, I just got lucky and just happened to be that she was out of frame. Well, the girl's out of frame, shadow hits the wall while the girl is in the frame is doing something different. So there's a disconnect because you assume it's a shadow. But I mean, those kind of things are just patience. You just got to wait. And again, it's that same thing of saying that like, you have to wait for those moments. There were many moments on either side of that, which I'm not sure, like I say, if I was shooting it on film, I would have not nailed that moment. I would, because there were many almost as good images as that on either side that I would have gone, I got it, that's a banger anyway, and walked off. That type of image is the beauty of digital, is that you can work that moment till its fullest moment and then walk away knowing, like, peace of mind of knowing that it didn't get better. Like, that's sort of that.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. And I mean, I also think, to be honest, if there was no window in that and there wasn't anything else, it would be too perfect. Like, I don't like that kind of like, it's got to have something that pulls it back. Otherwise it starts looking like a setup, and you don't need that.
Yeah. And I think that adds to it, the fact that it feels real.
Yeah, no, exactly.
But in my brain, the almost surreal. What the fuck?
Nailed it.
Can't fucking. Why do I have a podcast? It's like surreal. The surrealism of this moment in a real world environment is what I liked about this image. Yes. I mean, Matt, there were so many images that I just thought I really should talk about them, but I just wanted to keep to these almost delicate, smaller moments in a wedding. Definitely. I didn't want to pick anything that was like grander or anything like that. Which
I won't lie, like I prefer those little moments. You know, that's what I want. Yeah,
but for our listeners, please go and check his work out, because it's amazing. It's amazing. All right.
We normally, around about this time, we quite often ask, is there any projects or anything that's coming up that you're looking forward to? But I'm going to spin that, because we've not even barely mentioned Thrive yet. So what are you looking forward to about Thrive, and what can people expect from you?
Well, I'm looking forward to... Thrive's cool because I don't really get to meet that many other photographers working overseas, to be honest. Like, I did that legacy talk a while ago, which was rad, because I ran into and I know they come in, like Muse and Mirror are coming, so it'd be nice to catch up with them again. And that's where I met Melody and all them. But it's really nice to talk to people outside of your world of photography, because the Cape Town wedding scene is great, but it's small. You know, everyone knows everyone, and you kind of... It's good to come away with new ideas. Even for me, like, I'm excited to see other people's talks, you know? I want to see what they got to say, like, about how they do it. It's, like you say, it's like when you say, like, why you started this. You know, as a photographer, it's quite a lonely gig, right? You don't really get to watch other photographers that often. So you don't really... You just think you're doing your thing and that's how you do it. But when you watch other people do it or talk about it, you're like, well, there's other things to do, other ways to think. And, like, I enjoy that. And I enjoy... I definitely enjoy teaching. You know, like I used to lecture for a while, and I really like that. I also think I'm going to probably say it like it is. Like, I definitely think, like, with weddings, it's good though, because I think with people getting into the wedding game, it's hard. It's a really hard gig, and it's competitive, and for me, you've got to find something about your own work in it that's going to keep you in the game. Otherwise, I think you got to find the hook that keeps you coming back. Because I mean, there's very few of us that can honestly go, like, it's the couple's love forever and eternity that, like, you got to find, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's great and it's a huge part of it, but there has to be something about work, like the work of it, that you want to come back for, right? So I think that's a true thing, right? I think people come into this with ideas of, you know, like the romance of it, but wedding photography is a hard gig. It's one of the hardest gigs to do, and I think if you really want to make it, you need to really think carefully about it, and you need to figure out a way to do it your own way. And I think, if nothing else, like can at least help people figure that one out a bit. Like, hopefully, how you find your own way to do it, right? Like, what do you do? I think that's important.
Yeah. And if you don't think that way, start planning those exit strategies, people.
Yeah.
Start planning your exit.
I'll keep you posted.
Let's Matt, let's try and sell some tickets for your session. On day 2, you're going to be out with the camera. What's your plans? Why should people buy some tickets for your session?
Well, I think one of the things that I'm going to do, which I think, having been to a few workshops, is I think I work quite differently. And speaking to other people that have watched me work, like planners and videographers and stuff, I think I'm much, well, I would say almost more rapid is the word. Like, it's quite a spontaneous process, and it's very much like an intuitive thing. It's almost like, I'd say, like sometimes when I'm shooting, it's like a bit of a, yeah, it's a bit, can almost get a bit frenetic when you start seeing the good stuff. Like, because you're really hitting it, right? Like, you hit that moment like a sportsman. You're like, that is the gap. Go, like that's where the magic happens. Yeah. Like on either side of this thing, it's like average, yeah. But the moments, the bangers are rapid. Like, I find for myself, it's like, so I think if you're used to shooting slowly or planning or like prepping or like having a game plan, I think it'd be good for you to watch me shoot, because I think it's a little bit chaotic, but it's also controlled chaos. Like, another thing that I think is a good thing I can help people with is how to manage couples, like how to read people. I think is a really skill that I've kind of like developed over the years. Is like, how do you get the best out of these people, and what are they comfortable with and what they're not? I think that's a big thing. And then I also think on the second session, I'm doing a boudoir shoot. I don't know if you guys seen my boudoir stuff. You know that. So I'm doing 2 sessions with Thrive.
I've had a look through it.
Yeah. So the second session is a boudoir session, which I think is really interesting because that's not frenetic at all. That's like super calm. And really what that is, 90% of that is like working with someone, and particularly someone you don't know. It's like, how do you get from point A to point B with someone that you've very rarely met or never met? And how do you get images that they are going to be happy with and you're going to be happy with? And how do you keep your voice in that? Because boudoir is another thing that's very easy just to like fall back into the sort of bulk of imagery. Like, how do you create something new in that? Yeah. And how do you work with really small spaces? Like, how do you create unique imagery in really confined spaces where you don't have much control? Like, because very often when I'm shooting a boudoir shoot, you're going to shoot in their house. Like, I'm not big on like locations. I'm not going to be like, let's go to this specific location because it's beautiful. Most times I'll shoot them in whatever bedroom they have. Like, whatever that light is, or their house, right? Or wherever it is, apartment or whatever. So I think it's really about how to use what's available and how to read people. Like, how do you get someone who is probably feeling extremely vulnerable to feel comfortable? And how do you get them to get to that place where you need to get them to this sort of like frequency where we can create work, where you only have so much time to make someone feel comfortable. You don't have the whole day, and you've got to really like go from point A to B real quick. Like, how do you get that done? And I think what I was thinking was, I haven't quite locked it down yet with Thrive, but I know they've got some models, but I'm almost tempted to have like a volunteer from the audience and be like, who wants to do a boudoir shoot? Because I do think the reality of boudoir shoots is that you're not going to be shooting models. Like, they're easy, man. That's not a hard thing to do. They're already used to the camera. They know their angles, all the rest of it. Shooting someone that's never modeled, that wants it, but is nervous, that's the great trick. Like, how do you take someone who's scared of you and the camera and get them to feel comfortable for the first time and walk away feeling like they've done something that they're super proud of and had a great experience and still get imagery that they really like? And I think shooting a total stranger is a way better way to teach than like necessarily shooting a model per se. So I'm tempted. It just depends. I can have a backup plan. If they're like, not for me, we got a model. But it'd be interesting.
I was gonna say that would be super interesting to see if you were to do that, because it's not been done, as far as I know. Thrive, just picking someone out of the crowd.
Well, I'm gonna put our hands up. Like, let's go.
Yeah, damn. I mean, that sounds like 2 completely different styles of learning here.
Definitely.
Is anyone out there thinking about doing both? Do you get a discount for doing both? Like
Talk to Lisa, guys.
that'd be so. Talk to Lisa.
Yeah. But it would be cool because there's definitely two different ways of working. But I think the way you work with the boudoir is very much the way that you work with the bride on her own, actually, when you're taking portraits.
Yeah.
Like, so one of the things that I do, which is interesting, I've often wondered this about other photographers, and I've got to say this like a 90% of the time situation. So, there's like the reveal shot, like you come out in the dress and everyone's like, whoa. So I hate that shot. So what I want to do is I almost always ask the bride, and this is always what I find fascinating, is when you meet the bride, very often, the first time I met them is on the day. And I'll be like, all right, here's the deal. Mm-hmm. I think what we should do rather than that is get all your bridesmaids in or your mom, whoever you want around, and just get changed in front of that window light, and they will help you get into the dress. So they literally get naked and get into the dress. And I'm telling you, like, that shot is one of my favorite shots, and brides love that shot. But again, you've got to be able to get to a point with a bride in 25 minutes sometimes. So like, how you're going to get that kind of trust and be allowed in these like very intimate moments, because one is a constructed moment and one is a genuine intimate moment. And like, those are the ones that I really am interested in. And like, how do you get to that place with someone? And, there's like, and obviously with brides, that's just not their vibe. But 90% of brides, I'd say, are like presented in the right way in an environment that they feel comfortable. You get these incredible moments and access to imagery that's just really important. And you can really like, and the great thing about that is once you've got that shot and it's gone well, the bride is your putty for the rest of the day, because they've already gone through the most difficult section in the beginning, and now they're like, nah, he's got it. Like, if you can make the bride feel like you're working for them, like with them, you're on their team, like you with them, right? Mm-hmm. They're like, that's my man, he's got my back, we're gonna look great, like, let's go. The guard comes down and the wedding rolls real well. So I think that's a real skill, and it can overlap in both situations.
I love that. I genuinely love that. Actually, that's brought me that's brought one thing before we close the podcast. It's this has happened to me before, being the video person. Many consider maybe the second the second to the photographer. But if you're a photographer out there and if you haven't built up a relationship or, been around the bride in a way that suggests that you can stay during the undressing, don't put that on the video person. Because I quite often like to stay when the bride is getting into her dress, and I will have used language and been around her in a particular way to allow me to be there and her be comfortable. But don't suggest that I leave just because I'm a man. Yeah. Because that's really annoying. Anyway, I don't want to leave that on a negative note. Greg, book recommendations?
Me? You want me to give some?
I was going to say ask the question, but I just...
Do you have any book recommendations for our listeners? Ooh. Or should we all just go and get Skeeter's book?
No, don't. I love Skeeter's book, but it's not the book. It depends.
Terrible book.
Whether it's photography or business or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know any business books. I should be reading those books. That's the one I need to read. But I would say, like, guys, books, there's tons. I mean, you've got to start with like the classics. You've got to start with like Robert Frank, The Americans. Like, you've got to do that because it was probably the most famous photo book ever made ever. Mm-hmm. And it's a masterclass of narrative. It's also a masterclass of being a foreigner photographing something else, like you are at a wedding, right? So, the reason that book is so interesting is because he was a foreigner photographing Americans for the first time, presenting it to Americans. And it's really interesting because that's what makes that book so special. And I think when you're a photographer, you're outside of the family and the circle, and you're going in. And like, it's an interesting thing about, like, Robert Frank's book wasn't well liked by the Americans, but it became a definitive American book, right? So it's really interesting. I'd definitely start with that. And if I'm just going to recommend one other one, which I think would be a massive jump, but be the other side of the coin, but really is Nikita Teroshin. He's just done a book called, I'll tell you now. What's that book called? It is Nothing Personal. So Nothing Personal is a book where he went to all the arms fairs around the world, and he photographed like all the commerce of the arms dealing world and the kind of ridiculousness of it, and these very serious situations shot in a very beautiful, very like hard flash, really impressive book. Like honestly, one of the best books for a long, long time. Very different types of books.
Yeah, this is the first time
great book.
This is the first time I'm hearing about it, but I've just got it up on Amazon. I love this style.
Yeah, it's great.
For those of you interested in these books, you can buy it on Amazon. Nothing Personal is about £40 on hardcover. Robert Frank is about 60, just slightly under 60 for a paperback.
Or go to a local bookstore.
Or please go to a
find
local
one.
bookstore. I can't say that enough. Support your local thing. Also, I mentioned a website about it will study color and you can apply that to images. It was Good Hue. If you're interested, goodhue.io. So in case you were wanting to do that, it was there. All right. Matt, where can people find you online?
Instagram is about the only option you have. So I'm going to guess it's called The Woods Photography. You know why I'm called The Woods Photography? It wasn't like I sat down and really thought hard about this. It was because I used to have like fine art work with galleries under the name Matt K. Then I started shooting weddings and I just called it Matt K Weddings. And then the gallery phoned me and said like, bro, people are phoning us to book weddings. Like you have to change your wedding business name like immediately, like today. And I literally looked out the window and I saw a bunch of trees and I was like, The Woods. And that was it. Like that was the sum total of it. Like, marketing genius.
Very deep.
It's fucking layered. It's layered. It's very layered. God. You know. No, and then someone noted after the fact like you look like a lumberjack. I thought, and I was like, well, it all fucking works together, doesn't it? Right. So we go.
There you go. There you go. You just need a bit of plaid to be sorted. Honestly. Awesome. People can find us online at perspectivebycinemate.com. Our Instagram is also at perspectivebycinemate. Thank you to With Jack for sponsoring this episode. And are you ready for London Thrive? Because you should get ready for your 2-day workshop, an all-star photography conference held at the UK's first art hotel nestled in the heart of North London on the 8th and 9th of October. Unfortunately, we've just booked an elopement, so we won't be able to join you. And I'm very, very, very disappointed.
Mate, I was so keen for a beer.
I know. I mean, it's on the first day. Could we then skedaddle back down to London?
Just for the party.
Can we skedaddle down for the party? Anyway, if you have liked this conversation, you can join us on YouTube at www.youtube.com/@perspective-by-cinemate, or wherever you get your podcasts, you can listen to us there. We hope to see you in the next episode. However,
in the meantime,
enjoy your Thrive.